All right, well, welcome everyone holding by the book of Leviticus chapter 16, verse 2. Again, want to welcome everyone holding by the book of Leviticus chapter 16, verse 2, and hopefully going to finish that up. One other thing, finish up speaking about the death of the sons, of the two sons of Aaron, and last week pretty much spoke about doing things by rotes. Right, we hit that very strong last week, as my Rebbe spoke about that. So one other thing here to mention that says Merit of Rebbe, Arav going to Moshe should be well. He brings down in Tam V'das, and he brings down in his commentary on Chumash in the last part of the verse. The last part of the verse, verse 2. Again, chapter 16, verse 2, it says, Hashem said to Moshe, speak to Aaron, your brother. You may not come at all times in the sanctuary, within the curtain in front of the cover, upon the ark, so he will not die. For the clouds appear upon the ark cover. Right? That's part of the verse we want to hit here. What does it mean? What does it mean with the clouds appear upon the ark cover? We mentioned that speaking about that they had to bring incense, right? They had to bring incense. They couldn't see God obviously face to face. They saw him through a cloud, right? And he appeared upon the ark cover. Now, says my Rebbe here, interesting thing. It brings down a medrash. In Torah Is Not. In the medrash in Torah Is Not, it says like this. It says that which is on the Aaron, which is on the ark. So he says, I might think it's the covering. It's the covering of the ark. Right? That's what I might think. Says the Medrash. I would have thought it's talking about the covering. Says Asher ala Aaron. It says upon, on top of the Aaron. So, therefore, what? Therefore means not that it's a covering. It means it's on top of the Aaron itself. So, the Medrash says this ark cover is not a covering. It's really on top of it. Maybe it droops over the ark, but it's not what we call an ark cover. Okay, so that's what the Medrash says. That's what the Medrash here brings down. The Rebbe there says, brings down Rashi from Parshas Truma. And Rashi explains, no, Rashi goes against the Medrash. Rashi says that it's actually covering for the ark. So Rashi normally goes according to simple explanation, right? Unless he has difficulty explaining what it is. Because usually in Genesis, many places in Genesis, the very beginning, Rashi says, I can only explain it according to the Medrash. Because Rashi normally explains things, simple explanation. So it doesn't go according to the Medrash here. What does Rashi say? Rashi says it's a cover. Seemingly, that's a cover. Right? It goes against the Medrash over here. So my Rebbe then says that it's placed like this ark cover, what do you call it? This ark cover. Yeah, this ark cover is considered like a ledge, like like a board or something like that, where it's over on top of the Aaron, but it's not covering it. Right? So he's learning over here, somewhere in between. It's something on top, which is what the Torah says, but it's not exactly a cover. Right? The Medrash says it's a cover. The Medrash says, sorry, it's not a cover. Rashi in one place says it is a cover. He says somewhere in the middle. It's on top, but it's not really a cover. Right? It's not a full-fledged cover like we might think. Then my Rebbe says, okay, so somewhere in the middle. The Rebbe here says there's a hint. Again, anytime the Talmud or anyone uses this language that it's a hint, means it's not simple explanation. Right? So he says it's a hint over here. The fact it's not somewhere in between, right? It's not a full cover, but it's not, uncovered. So he says there's a hint over here. What does Torah represent? What is Torah itself? He says the Torah is not like a cover. It's not like a mechitza. It's not like a separation. It's not like a barrier. In the full-fledged sound of it. And there are no boundaries. There are no boundaries over here. And my Rebbe here says, anyone who wants to come and learn, can come and learn. Can come and take from what the Torah says. Now, again, this is a hint, obviously. It's not simple explanation. But he's telling you the following. He's telling you that the Torah itself has no boundaries. Now, we're going to explain what this means. Right? It doesn't have a boundary. You can't just put it in a box, so to speak. And the fact is, anyone who wants to come learn can come learn. Now, there is a caveat, as we always say. What's the caveat? As my Rebbe here says, there are no boundaries. But there are boundaries. He's telling you there are no boundaries. Anyone who wants to come and learn can come and learn. Now, why would I say that there are some boundaries here? And why there have to be boundaries here? There have to be boundaries because if a person wants to learn, again, anybody can come and learn. Anybody who wants to partake, whatever applies to them, they can come learn. Right? Even by non-Jews. They can certainly learn. But within boundaries. Within boundaries. Meaning, everyone who wants to come, anyone who wants to participate, very good. Everyone's allowed. But there are boundaries. What are the boundaries? So we say there are 70 faces to Torah. There are different ways, a person can learn. Some people like learning, much more in depth. Some people like learning, let's say much quicker. Go through more ideas at a quicker pace. Some people like to learn medrash. Some people like to focus on halacha. Some people like to focus, Jewish philosophy. Whatever it is. Whatever a person feels an affinity, that speaks to them. Regardless, there are ways to do it. Now, what does that mean there are ways to do it? Just because anyone can come and learn doesn't mean I can learn any way I want. Right? Kaufman's law, and again, I am definitely going to patent this, and that is you cannot turn the Torah into a pretzel, which means I can't do whatever I want. I can't learn it any way I want. I can't make it up as I go along. There are boundaries. There are boundaries. And if a person goes outside those boundaries, no matter how much they learn, it's not Torah. It's Torah made up in their own mind. Right? How many times I heard people say, well, I think this, and I think that, and I think the other thing. Well, if it's within the parameters of Torah, okay. If it's not within the parameters of Torah, what's the matter what we think? Goes against what God wants. We don't make this up. It's not a 5-year option to renew. Right? It is the real deal, but you can't do whatever you want. Person has free choice. Person can make whatever decision they want. They want to keep Torah as a Jew. They don't want to keep Torah. It's their choice. But there are repercussions. We say every day in the Shema, second paragraph, there are repercussions. We mentioned this many times. There are repercussions. So it can't be I can just do whatever I want. It can't be whatever I feel like. Because there could be serious repercussions. A Jew desecrates Shabbos in public, status of a non-Jew. They touch your wine. They touch a Jew's wine. And it's not cooked. Can't drink it. Spiritual cooties in my language. You know, there are other repercussions. Can't answer amen to their blessing. As my Rebbe would say, if you didn't answer amen, you know, where do you think this blessing is going to go? They don't really believe in God. Or and if they do, they give a lip service. But they don't believe in Torah. They want to do what they want to do. So why should I answer amen to their blessing? Their blessing is not a blessing at all. There are a lot of different repercussions. So within boundaries, if anyone's within boundaries, very good. There are many different ways to learn. But you have to be within certain parameters. If you're not within certain parameters, then it's Torah made up in your own mind. And practically speaking, that doesn't work. That'll never work. That'll never be passed down. And the numbers bear that out. Clear as day. Into marriage, assimilation. You don't do it right, it's not going to work. And even if we say you do it right, you have the best education, is that a guarantee? You're going to pass it down to the next generation? Also not a guarantee. Right? But we have a better chance of doing it. You know, we have more than 80, 90% success rate. Passing it down to the next generation. Right? Even if there are issues. Right? We have, you know, we're not going to say the Orthodox community doesn't have issues. We have issues. But if it works 90% of the time, that's pretty good. I'll take those statistics. Do we have what to work on? Yeah. Can we perfect it? Make it better? Yeah. Right now, this is what it is. So a lot of people thrive at it. Some people, let's say, somewhere in the middle. But it does get passed down. Right? It's the only branch, quote unquote, of Judaism that works. Everything else doesn't work. So here, Rebbe says, so what does Torah represent? The Torah represents something that has no boundaries. It's limitless. I mentioned last night in Pirkei Avos, right? We said that the Torah is as long as the earth, as wide as the sea. Right? It's something we can't necessarily fathom all its depth. Regardless, we still have to learn it. Learn it to the best of our ability. Okay, but there's a lot going on. Right? There's a lot going on in Torah. So I have to put my best foot forward. That's my obligation. So if I put my best foot forward, the Gemara says, there's no possible way I won't get something out of it. Right? If a person would say, I put my best foot forward, I didn't get anything out of Torah, not true. Right? And most people can probably bear this up. That, you know, over time, however much time that a person's learned, and if they learned half an hour a day, an hour a day, more, less, no one is going to say, I didn't get anything out of it. I didn't learn anything. It didn't change me in some way or change my outlook. If it didn't, then the Talmud says that the person's lying. Doesn't exist. Even if a person's not learning for the sake of heaven, got ulterior motives. He's learning, God forbid, Torah like mathematics. Is it possible that Torah is not going to affect him? How can the Torah not affect him? But there are some people that they're just learning like some other discipline that doesn't apply to their lives. So it could be in that case, even the power of Torah won't affect them. The Talmud says, even if a person learns not for the sake of heaven, eventually he'll get to the sake of heaven. In other words, he's learning for ulterior motives. So by learning for ulterior motives, it's going to get him to do what he needs to do later at some point. Why in this case we don't say that? Because their ulterior motives are negative. Extremely negative. They're not interested. Maybe somewhere down the line, they're going to put it into action. They're going to do something with it. Here they have zero intention, absolute zero negative intention. That they're never going to gain anything from it, but they like the thrill of the discussion. They like the discussion. Now, somewhere deep down, maybe something's going to change. Maybe potentially something's going to change. Because the reality is, Torah's got tremendous power. And that even if a person would learn it not for the sake of heaven, it could lead him in a different direction. It could inspire him somehow. It could have a tremendous effect. So it could do something. But someone who learns it, as Moshe Schneider, blessed memory, my Rebbe's Rebbe would say, all he's going to be is an ultra-Orthodox student, what we call a frummer student. That's what he's going to be. And even on that, I never recommend this, anyone who ever has the opportunity to learn with the Torah Giant, when I used to learn my Rebbe once a week, for like an hour, 45 minutes, an hour. We're learning Sefer Mitzvahs of the Rambam, but all the commandments according to the Rambam. And he mentioned this idea about learning Torah. Right? He mentioned this idea. So I asked him if a person like that who learns Torah, right? Someone who learns Torah in such a way, do they get the mitzvah of learning Torah or not? In other words, he was saying what his Rebbe said, that a person who learns this way is like a frummer student who's learning like mathematics. So the question was, I think a relatively simple question, does he get merit? Is that called learning Torah? So he didn't really want to answer. So my tape recorder was going as I was taping all these. And so I asked him again. Does the person get the mitzvah of learning Torah or not? Anyway, Hampton, he hard and this and that. So, not taking that lightly, I wanted an answer. Again, I would never, ever recommend doing this. I slam my hand down on the table. Papers go flying, dust in the air. My tape recorder is still intact. And the son comes running in. He's like, what's going on? So my Rebbe looked at it and said, no, don't worry about it, it's fine. So he walked out, he looked at me, I looked at him, he walked out. I looked at my Rebbe, he looked at me, I go, the Rebbe want to answer? I said, the Rebbe want to answer? And he said, fine. He said, I'll give you an answer. They get something, but it's not called the mitzvah of Torah. In other words, they get some merit over here of what they're doing, but it's not called the mitzvah of learning Torah. So I said, okay, that's all you had to say. But it was like, plucking something out of his body over here. It was like, he didn't want to answer. He didn't want to answer. But the reality is, someone who learns in such a case like that, what's that Torah worth? It could lead, to spiritual things later down the line. They may keep Torah mitzvahs later, maybe. Even if it's coming from a negative place. The Gemara says what it could lead to. In this case, no. Why not? Because he's learning it like some other discipline. That's not called not learning for the sake of heaven, which will lead you to the sake of heaven. He's saying this will never lead to the sake of heaven. Moshe Schneider said. Why not? Very simple. He's got more than negative intention. His intention over here is, I'm not going to let it affect me. I'm only in for my intellectual stimulation. That's the only reason I'm in. So the answer is he going to get some mitzvah of Torah there? Maybe something small. Is it going to be the normal mitzvah of Torah? No. So even though there are no boundaries to the Aaron, right? There are no boundaries over here. Since there are no boundaries, anyone can come. Anyone who wants to learn can learn. But you have to do it under the right pretext. You have to do it within the right parameters. Because if you don't do it in the right parameters, it's not called Torah anymore. Something else. Looks like Torah, maybe it smells like Torah. Right, but most people can probably sniff this out that it's false. Right? You don't have to be a rocket scientist. Right? There are a lot of things I think that are obvious. I mean, there are things that people may miss. But someone who's been learning long enough, they know. They know what the red flag. They know what to look out for. So things like this will never stick. It's like building a three-legged table. Three-legged table or a chair is never going to stand. Maybe it'll stand a little bit, but it's really never going to stand. It's not going to stand for the duration. Why? It's not made to stand. These other so-called groups are not made to stand. They'll have a duration for a certain amount of time. And even if they're in existence now, it's only a matter of time when they fall by the wayside. So even if I would agree, which I don't, but even if I would agree over here, that, 70 faces of Torah means anyone can learn how they want, when they want, whatever they want. And they can do whatever they want. Now, if I would agree to that, which I don't, but if I would agree to that, what's the end result? Right? Most people know where this is going. The end result is a disaster. That's the end result. And the bottom line is, it doesn't work. So it doesn't matter what we think, philosophically, whatever. People still say, that's what I believe, but it's going to die. It's never going to stick. What's the alternative? Either I keep all of it, or you go, what? It's better I do nothing? Well, you're not doing much anyway. So what's the difference? That would be my extremism here. Maybe if they do something, it's going to lead somewhere else. It's going to lead them to more mitzvahs. I mentioned last night, my class in Pirkei Avos. Passover's coming up. So I think a lot of people are going to be surprised after 120 years. They're going to be surprised. They get upstairs, and God's going to say, hey, you didn't even keep Passover. Go, what do you mean? I made a Seder every year. God says, okay, let's go back to the video. Let's see. Oh, look, it looks like you're making a Passover Seder here. What's the problem? Now, let's say they drank 4 cups of wine. They ate enough matzah, which they probably don't. But let's say they ate enough matzah. They did everything they should have done. Right? They go through a proper Haggadah. Everything being good. What's the problem? When is the Seder supposed to start? When do we eat the Paschal offering? Paschal offering is eaten at night. Now, you can't eat it past halachic midnight. That's why, a person's telling over a lot from the Haggadah, and you're going through it. You have to remember, you still have to eat the meal, and you still have to eat the last piece of matzah, as known as the afikomen. Right? That being the case, when does the afikomen, which represents the Paschal offering, when is it eaten? At night. Now, everyone changed the clocks, or most places in the States, and here in Israel changed the clocks. So now we're in daylight savings time. So now it's an hour later. So what happens? So what time is sundown? Sundown now, the next couple weeks, in certain places it's going to be 7:30, maybe 20 to 8, maybe later, whatever it is. So that means, technically, you cannot pray the evening service till 20 minutes after sundown. So let's say you come out to 8 o'clock. Let's say you didn't even pray the evening service. 8 o'clock would be the earliest in some places to be able to start the Seder. But what are some people going to do? They're going to say, I can't wait that long. I need to eat. Right? I can't wait that long. So what are they going to do? They're going to start the Seder at 6 o'clock. 5:30, 6 o'clock. 6:30, let's say. So they'll make Kiddush, they'll break them into matzah, the karpas, and they'll run through the Seder. They'll read through it, and they'll get to the second cup of wine. They have to wash their hands for bread. Whether they do or not doesn't matter, but they're going to eat matzah now. Now, they go through all this. They have the last 2 cups of wine, the afikomen, the 5th cup for Elijah. And the Seder's done. Now, let's say they got everything in before 8 o'clock, which is possible. Within 2 hours, you went through the Gada, you had your 4 cups of wine and grape juice, you ate however much matzah, you finished. You finished the entire Seder. Definitely possible. Now, what's the problem? What's the obvious problem? It's the wrong day. It's too early. The Paschal offering has to be eaten at night. This represents the Paschal offering. So, what's God going to say? God's going to have a big laugh over it. You kept the Passover Seder. You did it, you idiot, on the wrong day. It's the wrong day. Isn't the thought that counts? No. It's done on the wrong day. And then the next day, next night, you say, okay, it's rabbinical in origin, where outside of Israel has to have a second Seder. Same thing happens. Now, the only difference is now it's actually Passover. Right? So now it's actually the right day. But what's the problem? Again, it has to be done at night. So if they eat the matzah during the day, they ate it technically on Passover, but it's too late. Right? It's too late for the first day, and it's too late, and it's too early for the second. That means you don't get credit for doing it. You did it the wrong time. Take it a step further. Someone who had an obligation to mourn for. Father, mother, sister, brother, God forbid a child or a spouse. The Yortzeit, the day that commemorates the death of the person who died. So common practice is someone to lead services at night, the morning, the afternoon of the next day, and say the mourner's prayer. Right? Someone tells me the mother died. They have to say, the mourner's prayer. So they go to synagogue. They go to synagogue and say it at night. I don't know if they go during the day. Maybe they go during the day. I don't know. But they go at night. They go at night to say Kaddish. Say the mourner's prayer. What's the problem? So this synagogue all year round, they pray at the same time. They pray at 7 o'clock at night. So during the winter, not a problem. If you had your site, someone who died, you're going to say the mourner's prayer, fine, you don't have a problem. 7 o'clock at night in the winter, no problem. What if it's summertime? In this case, the Yortzeit falls in the summer. Right? The commemoration of the person who died is in the summer. So they say, well, I'm going to synagogue at 7 o'clock at night. I'm going to pray there. I don't know if they're going to pray. They're going to say Kaddish. Let's say better. They're going to come say the mourner's prayer. Okay? What time is sundown there? 8 o'clock? 7:45? Later? Some places even later. What's the problem? Wrong day. When does the day start by Jews? At night. So if the Yortzeit is at night, and they say Kaddish, the mourner's prayer, and it's not nighttime, it's the wrong day. Right? So a person get upstairs, what's God going to say? Say, you didn't even, you said Kaddish, and your parents' Yortzeit, your mother's Yortzeit over here. Commemorating the day she died. You said the mourner's prayer, there's only one problem. What's that? Did it on the wrong day. You're going to say, okay, it's a custom. It's rabbinical. It's not from the Torah. Could very well be. But these type of things we take very seriously. Laws of mourning we take very seriously. Even though, there are a lot of different customs when it comes to mourning without going into all that. But when it comes, saying Kaddish for someone who died is an elevation of the soul. It elevates the soul. How it works, can't tell you, but it elevates the soul. So when a parent dies, get 11 months every day to say Kaddish. 11 months. Some say you say Kaddish until the last month, or not exactly every day, to show that the person's not so evil, because they're only being judged in hell for 11 months, whatever it is. Right? But you're saying Kaddish to elevate the soul. Or hopefully, the soul's getting an elevation over here. Now, by doing so, it's a tremendous merit. Tremendous merit for the soul. Especially if the person, let's say their parents weren't religious, they were idol worshippers, whatever. Or let's say by a Jew, we'll make it easy. Parents weren't religious. Let's say the child's religious, parent dies. So they say Kaddish, they do everything they're supposed to do. And that's tremendous merit for the parent. And if their grandkids go in the right direction, it's also tremendous merit for the grandparent. So it's a tremendous elevation for the soul. You do the wrong thing, okay, much worse. But in this case, person has the right idea. Right? I'll give that much credit. They have the right idea. And the right idea is they feel an obligation, go to synagogue and say the mourner's prayer. They don't understand elevation of the soul, not elevation of the soul, this, that, right? But they go anyway. They go and they say Kaddish. By many secular Jews that are affiliated with the synagogue, that's what they'll do. But you have to do it at the right time. You have to do it on the right day. Now, the intention is good. I'm going to give, I'm in a generous mood right now. I'm going to give a little bit of slack here. The heart's in the right direction, but it's clouded by the brain. What do I mean? The brain saying it doesn't matter when they pray. I'm going to go. That's what I'm going to do. But it's the wrong day. Imagine God wakes up that soul who they're supposed to be praying for. We're supposed to be saying Kaddish for, and say, look, your child over here, look what they're doing. They come into synagogue, to say the mourner's prayer to elevate your soul, and guess what? It's the wrong day. You don't think that soul's going to be embarrassed? Totally embarrassed. Person doesn't have an issue what they're doing. They're going to say, that's what I do. My answer was, why don't you just go somewhere else that prays later and do it on the right day? That they won't. That's already too much. That's too much self-sacrifice. That's taking me out of my comfort zone. I'm not going to go out late at night. No, they can make excuses. They can say it's dangerous, it's this. Okay, then you'd be exempt. Maybe. But they're not saying that. They're going to say, this is what I do. Now, when a person says, this is what I do, that has nothing to do with Torah mitzvah. It's Torah made up in their own mind. But for goodness sakes, it's going to save someone embarrassment in the future. That you did it on the wrong day. Say, but aren't there boundaries? We said there are no boundaries to Torah. Anyone who wants to come and learn. But you can't overstep boundaries over it. You can't just do what you want. You can't take yourself out of Torah mitzvah. I mean, this is pathetic. Beyond pathetic. But someone will say, this is what I do. Maybe not what you do. This is what I do. And God will have to understand. I can't do any better. I love hearing that. Of course you can do better, you just don't want to. You're not interested. They say it's enough I did this. I don't know, if I were playing God, I'd be pretty ticked off. I would definitely be ticked off over here. Right? No question. How can it be that's good enough? How in the world can that be good enough? You say, I gave it the old college try. What do you mean the old college try? It didn't work that hard. Going to synagogues, one thing. Maybe they'll get credit for that. But how can they get credit for doing something they did on the wrong day? They didn't do right. So wherever here says, anyone who wants to come and learn, come and learn. In that sense, there are no boundaries. There are no boundaries to Torah. That is true. There are no boundaries. But at the same time, what I do has to be within boundaries of what the Torah wants me to do. And if it's not within those boundaries, then I'm in trouble. I can't make up my own thing. I mean, people do it. Can't make it up as I go along. But the reality is, I have to do what it says. I have to listen to the rabbis in every generation. I have to hold according to the code of Jewish law. I can't do what I think is in my heart. I can't do what I think. And if I have a doubt whether something permissible or not, you got to ask your local Orthodox rabbi what to do. If not, it's a free-for-all. Unfortunately, it's what we see today. In many ways, it's a free-for-all. I'm not saying there aren't differences of opinion among rabbis and this and that. Okay, within parameters. When a person goes outside those parameters, it's not Torah anymore. You want to say, I'm not Jewish? I didn't say you weren't Jewish unless you did something to change that status. But essentially, there are parameters. There are parameters. And I can't turn the Torah into a principle. Right? So here my Rebbe says, anyone who wants to come and learn, they're more than welcome. But you have to do it the right way. And if you don't do it the right way, it's not Torah. Looks like Torah, it smells like Torah. It's not Torah. It's not what it is. And there are people who want to expand these boundaries. Other people don't care about the boundaries. But the end result is an absolute disaster. That's the end result. So even if I would agree, which I don't, that you're allowed to leave your mind open till your brains fall on the floor, then okay. If it works, you can pass it down, great. And if you can't pass it down and it's a disaster, and 70% of the time it doesn't work, and no argument. And nothing to talk about. Yeah, that would end verse number 2. So I guess before I go any further, take any questions. There are any questions? There any questions on any of that up until now? All right, let's go further. Verse 3 says the Torah, again, chapter 16, verse 3. It says, "Bezois yavo Aaron el hakodesh v'par ben bakar lachatas v'ayol ha'olim." The Torah says, with this, I have to explain why it says bezois. With this, why the Torah has to tell me that, we're going to see. With this, Aaron shall come into the sanctuary with a bull, a young male of cattle for a sin offering, and a ram for an olah offering. Right? What's an Ola offering? An Ola is a burnt offering. What did it atone for? Bad thoughts, negative thoughts. Oh, we're going to speak about that. But comes along Rashi. Rashi says, what does it mean with this? Don't really need it over here. We could just say, Yavo Aaron El HaKodesh. Aaron came into the sanctuary. I don't need with this. With this seems superfluous. Seems like something I don't need. So it says Rashi, I got a gematria. What's the gematria? Gematria means every letter corresponds to a number. Right? Aleph is 1, Beis is 2, Gimel is 3, Kuf is 100, Reish is 200, Tav is 400, etc. So Rashi says it's gematria, the numerical value of the word bezois is 410. Right, let's do the math. Bezos, Beis is 2. Zion is 7. 7 and 2 is 9. Aleph is 1 is 10. Tav is 400. Right? Do the math, it's 410. Now, what does 410 correspond to? 410 years, 410 years. What does 410 years correspond to? The years of the first Beis Hamikdash. How long did the first temple, before it was destroyed in Jerusalem, how long was it up for? 410 years. Right? So it's a hint over here. Or I shouldn't say a hint. The numerical value is 410 years. Same time as the temple. Now, the Medrash over here asks the following question. The Medrash asks, Aaron comes into the sanctuary 2 animals. Right? He comes with a bull, and he comes with a young male of cattle. Now, what does the Torah say? The Torah tells me bezois, with this. What's the question? What's the obvious question here? Medrash is asking. 2 animals. Grammatically, you wouldn't say with this. Grammatically, you would see ba'ela, with these, plural. Why leave it the singular? So the Torah uses the word bezois to the fact that the first Beis Hamikdash temple is going to stand for how long? 410 years. Now, what did we say before? We said before you can't go into the Holy of Holies whenever you want. So it doesn't mean or imply the prohibition against entering the sanctuary at times other than Yom Kippur applies when? Maybe it only applies in the time of when the Beis Hamikdash is standing, when the temple is standing, or maybe when the first Beis Hamikdash is there. The verse implies that 18 Kohanim who exceeded Aaron, right? There were 18 Kohanim that succeeded Aaron as a Kohen Gadol during the period of the first temple. And they were all righteous, who carried out the tradition of Aaron. So Aaron's considered to have come into the sanctuary for that entire 410-year period. Right? So there's an issue over here. First of all, bezois, I shouldn't have used that word. I should have used the word ba'ela, with these. So Rashi says I'm going to use a medrash. Right? I'm going to say that it's a representative of what? 410 years of what? Of the temple. Because I would have thought what? I would have thought prohibition against entering the sanctuary at times other than Yom Kippur applies only in the period of the first Beis Hamikdash. Maybe going into the Holy of Holies applies then at all times. That I'm not allowed to go in. That a Kohen's not allowed to go in. Maybe it only applies in the time of the first temple, not any other time. That's one explanation. Comes Rashi, second explanation. Rashi says, with this shall Aaron shall come, Even though it's not to be done at any time, Rashi says that we understand he's not allowed to come in whenever he wants, except on Yom Kippur. Because the Torah says explicitly at the end of the portion, in verse 29, see when we get there, it says in the 7th month of the 10th of the month. So we know explicitly, when you're not allowed to go in. Right? So we understand you're not allowed to go in any time. We saw that before. But now I got an explicit verse, verse 29. Now, what did Rashi say before? Let's not lose track here. Rashi in the previous verse said that Aaron's allowed to come in the sanctuary only when there's a smoke cloud of incense on Yom Kippur. If there's an incense cloud or smoke on Yom Kippur, he's allowed to go in. But it still says over here on Yom Kippur, meaning that maybe go in another time. I might think maybe go into a different time. Either with the smoke cloud of incense on Yom Kippur, or what the Torah here says, with a bull for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering during the rest of the year. Maybe I come in another time. Maybe the high priest can go in another time. Obviously not. Right? But maybe that's what I would have thought. Or there's another opinion. The Medrash says that our verse over here is not talking about Yom Kippur. What's it talking about? Any other day of the year. Now, in general, the high priest is not allowed to go into the Holy of Holies whenever he wants. We understood the previous verse. We spoke about it. When's the only time he's allowed to go in the Holy of Holies? On Yom Kippur. What would we have thought? Maybe any other time during the year. Maybe it's not every day. Maybe it's not every other day. Maybe it's not once a month. Maybe it's once every 6 months, every 3 months. Maybe he's allowed to go in a different day, not just in Yom Kippur. But any other Kohen Gadol was allowed to enter the Holy of Holies at any time, so long as he brought the offerings that we mentioned over here. Medrash says something interesting. We're understanding he can only go in on Yom Kippur. The Medrash, though, says if he wanted to go in another time during the year, he's only allowed to go in with what? With a bull and a young male's calf. He has to bring a sin on. Right? Rashi over here goes with a different view. Goes with a different explanation. That the permission granted Aaron to go in the Holy of Holies doesn't apply any other time during the year. Only applies on Yom Kippur. So we'd have to see further this Medrash, why he'd be allowed to go in other times. But Rashi doesn't hold that. He goes against the Medrash. Now, we mentioned before, Rashi will only bring in a Medrash if he can't explain it according to simple explanation. Rashi over here has a simple explanation. What's it talking about? Yom Kippur. If it's talking about Yom Kippur, and that's the only time you can go in, then it cannot be talking about any other time. Either you want to go in once a month, once every 2 months, whatever it is. The Medrash says you can go at different times. Rashi says not that way. Because if I look at verse 29, we said one day we're going to get there. Right? Verse 29 says explicitly, at that time. Right? Exactly, at that time. Right? It's going to be that specific time. That specific day, that specific month. But it's not any time he wants to go. Or every so often, that wouldn't be the case. Totally wouldn't be the case. Right? So explains Rashi over here. Comes along the Ramban. Comes on Nachmanides. And he says, I got a hint over here. Again, a hint means not a simple explanation. Certainly not. He says, I got a hint. So he says, brings down the Medrash. And the Medrash says, when the high priest went into the Holy of Holies, what did he go in the Holy of Holies with? He went into the Holy of Holies with bundles and bundles of mitzvahs. You have to remember, if the high priest is not holding at the level he needs to be holding, they had a string attached to his foot, attached to his leg, I think, or his foot, and that if he wasn't holding where he's supposed to be, he goes into the Holy of Holies, he's not gonna come out. He's not gonna come out alive, so they had to pull him out. So a person, high priest in general, was on a very high spiritual level, extremely high spiritual level. We mentioned this before, I'll just mention again. There were people who bought their way to the priesthood. When, the temple's already going down, pretty much. And a person didn't live out the year, because whatever they took over on Yom Kippur, they're going to go into the Holy of Holies. But what's going to happen? If they go into the Holy of Holies, they are going to die, because they're not holding spiritually. So they're going to die. Now, you could tell me it's a very prestigious position. Maybe the most prestigious position in the history of the Jewish people. Could very well be. Fame, power, all kinds of things. What's the problem? Problem is, you're going to go in the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. You're going to want to see God. You're bringing the incense, you ain't going to see nothing. Boom. You're going to die. I don't necessarily know what the thrill, of such a thing is. Maybe, just to see God once in their life and then they're going to die. I don't know. Maybe tremendous thrill. I don't have a good answer. I don't even have a bad answer. Right? That doesn't make any sense to me. You got a high position. I get it. You get power, all the frills with it. Okay. But you have a death sentence on your head. You're not worthy. No matter what your ego tells you. You're not worthy deep down. Why in the world do you think you're going to come out of this alive? And a person may say, doesn't matter if I come out of it alive or not. The fact is I went in. That's the whole point. I went in. And I had that experience and then I died. Well, don't you want to tell that experience to somebody? Don't you want to give that over? Guess they didn't care. The experience itself was worth it and they died. Okay? But a person here, the Ramban here says, according to the Medrash, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, goes in the Holy of Holies with what? With an abundance of mitzvahs. Okay. And hopefully he's on the level, he comes out unscathed. If you're not on the level, even with a lot of mitzvahs, he's in trouble. And the Medrash says, what are all the mitzvahs? What are all these mitzvahs? So the Medrash says, one of them is B'schus HaTorah, the merit of the Torah that he got. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 44. What other merit? He did circumcision. Bris Milah. Genesis chapter 17, verse 10. Right? This is the covenant that I made, God says, for you to guard. Right? Again, bezos. Bezos is using on the Medrash is focusing on that word with these. With this. What other merits? The merit of Shabbos. Right? As the prophet Isaiah says. Chapter 46, verse 2. Right? Happy is the person that does this. What does this represent? Shabbos. What another mitzvah? Chus Yerushalayim. The merit of Jerusalem. Because Yechezkel, prophet Ezekiel says, chapter 5, verse 5, Zos Yerushalayim, this is the holy city, Jerusalem. Not only that, the merit of the tribes, the Shvatim. Because it says in Genesis chapter 49, verse 28, these are the ones that my father is going to bless. Yaakov, the Shvatim, the tribes. Then you got the merit of Yehuda. Merit of Yehuda because Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 7, it says, for thus Yehuda, this is Yehuda. Merit of the Jewish people, Knesset Yisrael. Right? It says in Shir Shirim, the Song of Songs, chapter 7, verse 8. The merit of Truma, of taking Meiser. Right? Taking tithing of fruits, vegetables grown in the land of Israel. Because it says in the book of Exodus, chapter 25, verse 3, this is Truma, Bizois, or Zois, this is Truma. What else? Merit of Meiser. Right? It says in the prophet Malachi, chapter 3, verse 10, the merit of Korbanot, sacrifices. As it says over here. So, says the Ramban, he goes to this Medrash, just mentions a number of these mitzvahs, and he says, this needs a long explanation. He ain't giving it here. He goes, this I'm not going to explain, but it needs a huge explanation. He says, but everything's already explained with it. Right? So the Ramban says the interesting thing. Kohen Gadol comes, he's got all these mitzvahs. Torah, Bris Milah, circumcision, Shabbos, Jerusalem, the tribes, Yehuda, Jewish people, Truma, Meiser, a lot of things. A lot of things here. A lot of merit. But obviously, your mind has to be there also. Even though he did a lot of mitzvahs, if you're not fully concentrated, you go in the Holy of Holies, could cost you your life. Right? So first, I have to be very careful. That's why when the Kohen Gadol came out, he went in the Holy of Holies and he came out unscathed. They made a huge party. Made a huge party. Because he came out unscathed. So explains the Ramban. Now, comes on the Kuyakar. Over here. Kuyakar here says the following. It brings down a medrash. Not the same medrash. Nope. Brings down a medrash here. And he says like this. He says, first thing is the bull that's going to be brought. What does that correspond to? Or let's say better, who does it correspond to? Corresponds to Avram. How do I know? Says the Medrash. It says in Genesis chapter 18, verse 7, Bakarat Avram. When three Arabs, or disguised Arabs, they were really malachim, they're really angels, right? They come, one of them comes to heal Avram, after circumcision, he wants to have guests, and he runs after the bull, runs after, this animal, right, in order to feed them. And the aisle, the ram, who does it correspond to? Isaac, Yitzchak, because Yitzchak was really supposed to be sacrificed. And who gets sacrificed in the end was this ram. And the two goats, who does that represent? Yaakov. Why? Because it says in Genesis chapter 27, verse 9, and he says, I took from there two goats. Okay. So I got a bull, I got a ram, I got two goats. Right now, two goats, we'll see, represented, or it could be represented the two goats. One, the goat to Azazel, one that the Kohen Gadol atoned for him and his family. Right, and all that, we'll see. So then what's going on here? Ask the Kli Yakar, okay, What's the intention of this medrash? So the Kli Yakar explains that we see by Moshe Rabbeinu that God only comes to him in the merits of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Why? How does he know? Because the Torah says, Exodus chapter 4, verse 5. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu is asking, how Jewish people going to believe me when I come and I say, I'm going to take, God's going to take you out of Egypt? Because you're going to say, God appeared before me, the God of your fathers, the God of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So his merit is not his own. Not that Moshe Rabbeinu thought it was on his own. Right? But what are his credentials? His credentials are Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So too, the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, when he comes to atone for himself, his family, the Jewish people, who's he coming in merit of? The Avos. Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. But he says, okay, very good. But what are we talking about over here? What's the topic at hand? The topic is Yom Kippur. So what does all this have to do? Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, what does that have to do with Yom Kippur? So he says all these things are a hint to Yom Kippur. Why? Because if you look at Genesis chapter 18, verse 7, by Avraham, and he ran after the bull, right? It says over here that this medrash holds, if that's on Yom Kippur. When he took the bull to slaughter, that was Yom Kippur. Because there's a medrash brought down in Pirkei the Rebbe Be'ezer, that on that day that Avraham was circumcised, it was Yom Kippur. Right? It happened to be Yom Kippur. Now, what's the obvious question? How can we, if the Torah is not given yet, per se, even though the Gemara says he held by the entire Torah, right? Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. How can he be circumcised on Yom Kippur? Right? That's a problem. Why is it a problem? Because if a child's born in the 8th day on Yom Kippur, then you circumcise the child on Yom Kippur. If the child, let's say, was yellow, was jaundice, and you push it off until the numbers go down, till it's healthy to do circumcision. So if that day is not the day that you were supposed to do it, it was a pushed off day, now the day comes, it's Yom Kippur, ready to be circumcised, you don't do it on Yom Kippur. You do it on the next day. Because you don't do the mitzvah over here. One second. You don't do the mitzvah over here. One second here. You should be able to hear me now. It's better. You don't do circumcision. You don't do circumcision if the mitzvah is not that day. Right? That's what we hold. In other words, if Yom Kippur comes and it's the 8th day, then you do the bris, you do the circumcision on Yom Kippur. If, let's say, the baby was jaundice, if the baby was jaundice, let's say better. If the baby was jaundice, then what happens? That's not the right day to do the circumcision. In other words, that might be the 9th day, could be the 10th day, could be the 11th day. So we do not say at all that you're allowed to do circumcision on that day. You don't say it circumvents that day. Meaning that Meaning that, supersedes. We don't say that circumcision over here is going to supersede Yom Kippur because it's not the right day. Totally not the right day over here. So, interesting enough, Avraham Avinu is 100 years old. It's not the right day for him to do circumcision. Right? It's not the 8th day. Torah says the 8th day. So you can tell me, okay, Torah wasn't given yet. If the Torah wasn't given yet, fine. But there is a question. Right? We're just going to ask the question. And that is, how could he have done it on Yom Kippur? You don't have to supersede Yom Kippur over here. Right? In other words, we don't say you do it on Yom Kippur anyway. If it's the 8th day, then there's nothing to talk about. Right? If it's the right day, it's going to be the 8th day, then even do it on Yom Kippur. But if it's not the 8th day, it's the 9th day, 10th day, 11th day, 12th day, 15th day, let's say the baby's jaundiced. You don't do it on Yom Kippur. You wait. Avraham Avinu is 100 years old. Should have waited till after Yom Kippur. So again, what's the simple explanation? Simple explanation is before the Torah is given. So even if you have by Yom Kippur, you can do it on Yom Kippur. Wasn't forbidden yet. One possible explanation. So he says over here that he did circumcision on Yom Kippur. Right, he did it on Yom Kippur. And this whole action, right, this whole action itself was done in the plains of Mamre. Right, that's when he got the advice, right, from 3 people whether to do circumcision, don't do circumcision. Anyway, it was all in one day. It was all in one day, this whole thing, this whole event. And what was it? It was on Yom Kippur. Even though he made a meal, how can he make a meal for them? How can he cook for them? Sure, first of all, he shouldn't be making food for them, even if they're not Jewish. And second of all, you're making a whole feast over here on Yom Kippur. So what's the answer? Exactly what we said. That nevertheless, Torah hasn't been given yet. So since Torah hasn't been given yet, maybe it's not a problem. But he was stringent on himself and not on others. So in other words, he didn't eat. He gave to them to eat. For him, he was stringent on himself. But really, could he have eaten? Could have eaten. Right? He certainly could have eaten. He's in a weakened state. Even if it's on Yom Kippur, what's the problem? Let him eat. So he let other people eat. He didn't eat. He didn't eat over here because he was stringent on himself. That's the first thing. Second thing is the ram that was killed instead of Isaac, instead of Yitzhak. Also, the Medrash says, so says the Kli Yakar over here, the Medrash brings out also Yom Kippur. What a coincidence. That whole thing also took place on Yom Kippur. How do we know? What's the proof of the Medrash? Interesting. Proof of the Medrash is, what does the verse tell me? He said on that day, the mountain of God you will see. Right? And every year on that day, God appeared in a cloud. And they saw Hashem. Oh, what day is that? What day is that God appeared in the clouds? Right? God appeared in the cloud over here. What did we say before? Yom Kippur. Right? Another proof for Yom Kippur. So that's the second case. That's the second case of Yom Kippur. Says the Medrash further. Shnei Gidei Izim. 2 goats that are good for you and good for your sons. The Medrash says, or good for your children. But what does that mean? Good for you means through their hands, they're going to get all the blessings. Right? They're going to accept all the blessings. Good for your sons, good for your children. They're going to get atonement. They're going to give over atonement over here on Yom Kippur. So what do we see? We see that Yaakov is promised that there's going to be atonement on this holy day. Using what? 2 goats. A goat that Aaron's going to use to atone for himself, his family, and the goat Azazel, and we'll speak about when we get there, that's going to atone for the Jewish people. So comes on the Kli Yakar and says, unbelievable medrash. He says, you got Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, all did things on Yom Kippur. All representative Yom Kippur. Avraham, the bull, etc., was on Yom Kippur. Right? Bris Milah was on Yom Kippur. Circumcision on Yom Kippur. The ram of Yitzhak, the Medrash says, on Yom Kippur. The 2 goats, the illusion is Yom Kippur. Right? Pretty amazing thing here. And that the Medrash started with all these things are going to be the merit of who? Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. And that's why when we pray, we say the Shemona Esrei. When we say the silent meditation, whatever you want to call it, Shemona Esrei, what do we start out with? Credentials. Blessed are you, God, the source of all blessing, the God of our forefathers, Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Why do we start out with that? We start out with that very simple. Because when we're going to ask for all our needs, we're going to ask for knowledge. We're going to ask for parnasa, for livelihood. We're going to ask for health, redemption, physical redemption, spiritual redemption. Right? Many things we're going to ask for. How can you ask a king or the King of Kings? How can you ask anything if you don't have credentials? You got to produce credentials. Right? Somebody's going to go in. We mentioned this before. Someone who goes in for a job interview. You don't start asking how much you want to make, and what your conditions are before you start giving your credentials. That no one would do. I mean, if you did, you're not going to get the job. That's being a little bit overconfident. You can say, okay, I need this, I need that, I need the other thing. You haven't even said what your credentials are. All the more so, we got an opportunity 3 times a day if you're a guy, twice if you're a woman, right? If you're a Jew, to pray. You come in front of the King of Kings. You don't start saying, I want this, I want that, I want the other thing, and you owe it to me, and you should give it to me, and blah, blah, blah. You didn't produce any credentials. You have no credentials. Right? That's the reason, or the main reason, could be other reasons also. Right? But that's the main reason when we say the holiest prayer of any prayer service, and we're asking for our needs, you don't come in just asking, give me, give me, give me, give me, give me. Got the gimmies here. Give me, give me, give me, give me, give me. And it's like you owe me. Why? God can say, why do I owe you? Who are you? Who are you to come in front of me? What do you mean? You don't remember who I am? No, I want you to say it. Who are you? You say, oh, I got a pedigree. Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Oh, you got a pedigree. It's different. You we're walking on their coattails. We've always been walking on their coattails. We don't have merit ourselves. If it only be the merit of us, we wouldn't be here. The world would have been destroyed a long time ago. They open up the door. They open up the frontier, so to speak, for all mankind. Discussing this the other day, this idea about Avram. And how Avram came to knowledge of God at the age of 3, the age of 40. Everyone, was worshiping idols. Here's Bob, don't leave home without him. Everyone had their pocket God. And he convinced them by a world of design. And how he looked at the world. He was able to convince tens of thousands. He and his wife. So he laid the foundation. Says the Ramchal in Derech Hashem, he's called the source. He's the source. Right? Yitzhak, Yaakov, they're the branches. Right? He's like the trunk, the tree, they're the branches. That's why we say in the first blessing of the Shemona Esrei, God, the source of all blessing, Magen Avraham. The shield of Abraham. Why not say the shield of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov? Or why not say the shield of Yitzhak and Yaakov separately? Because who is the main person over here? Avram is known as the father of all nations. The Muslims go back to Ibrahim. To Abraham. He's the father of Ishmael. All nations go through him. So says the Ramchal, he's the strength. He's the trunk over here. The roots come out of him. The branches come out of him. Who are the branches? Yitzhak, Yaakov. Not Yishmael. Shmuel's not a branch over here. Doesn't mean he's not powerful in his own right, but he's not a branch over here. Everything he gave over to Yitzhak, spiritually. So the Ramchal says, he's the main one. God chose him out of anybody. And he made the Jewish people through him. Now you have to remember, says the Ramchal, anyone who wanted to join could have joined, at least till the Tower of Babel. But God had mercy. Anyone who wanted to join up until Mount Sinai. After Mount Sinai, that's it. It was closed. Then you got to go through conversion if you want to be a Jew, or you stay as a Noahide as a non-Jew. But God gave an opportunity. Anyone who wanted to join could have joined. I had someone once tell me, kind of funny story. Someone tells me, why do I have to go through conversion? Had I been there, my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents' generation, I never would have rejected the Torah. Because it's a medrash in the Talmud, Avodah Zarah set 2b to 3a. What does the Talmud tell me? God went to all the nations reject the Torah. God comes to Jewish people, he says, you want the Torah? They say, sure. You want to know what's written in it? They say no. They say, Naaseh v'nishma. We're going to do, and then we'll hear what it says. Right? So who's the anchor over here? Who's the one that brought absolute monotheism to the world? Abraham. He was living in a world of idolatry. And the Rambam says, in the time of Enosh, there was a huge mistake at the beginning of the laws of idolatry. The world made a huge mistake. They gave power to things that didn't have power. Why? One reason, God's too busy running through black holes, keeping the universe together. Why does he want to deal with man? We're too below him. So God's doing other things, so he gave power to other things. They made a mistake. Even with that, Abraham came and he paid a serious price for his beliefs. Got thrown in a fiery furnace, first of the 10 tests. Had to go against his father, big idolater. Went against everybody. So the reason we're able, to fight against our struggles, whatever the evil inclination throws at us, is because of Abraham. Why? Because the Torah says, what's he called? He's called Avraham HaIvri. Now, people make the mistake and mistranslate it, and they say, oh, Abraham the Jew. He wasn't Jewish yet. Even if you tell me he kept the entire Torah before it was given, he wasn't Jewish yet. So what does Avraham HaIvri mean? All you great biblical grammarians out there. It means Abraham's on the other side. What does it mean the other side? He's on the other side of the world. It means, everyone's on one side, Abraham's on the other. So because of the struggles, we say, the actions of our fathers are assigned to the children. The fact that Abraham went through all these trials and tribulations, and he passed them with flying colors, he allows us to go through them as well and to be able to fight them. Without Abraham, he put that in the world. He absolutely put that in the world, the ability to fight against the tide, go against the tide. That's what he did. That was his power. So, Yitzhak, he became great. You have a father like that, why wouldn't you be great? But isn't it true? We mentioned before, Torah is not a Yerusha. Torah is not an inheritance. So just because your father was great and his father was great spiritually, doesn't mean anything about you. It just means you have a lofty pedigree. When you have a lofty pedigree, my Rebbe's mother would say, just add a zero, another zero. You got to fill great shoes over here. It helps. I'm not going to say it doesn't help. Someone that had that kind of pedigree became great in and of themselves. Tremendous thing. Why? Because if a person grew up with it, and they had family that grew up with it, cousins, relatives, aunts, this, that, isn't it easier to be righteous when it's all you're surrounded by it? Yeah, it's easier. If a person had to fight for Torah and mitzvahs in a certain way, it's easier for them because they had to fight for it. Someone who grew up with it, you can get lulled to sleep. You do it because your parents did it, because your family did it. Relatives did it. No, you got to fight for it for yourself. Everyone has to fight for their own Torah. So how are we able to do that? Right? Because Abraham put that in the world. Now, comes along Jacob, also became great. And through him came the Jewish people. But Jacob didn't become great himself. He didn't become great in a vacuum. Abraham became great in a vacuum. Everyone else was idolatrous. The famous Medrash, his father, Terach, had a store, sold idols. So one day Terach goes out, Abraham destroys all the idols, puts a stick in the hand of the idol. In the one idol. So Terach comes back and he says, Dave, what happened over here? He said, there's a big fight, all the idols, and this idol beat everyone up and destroyed them. So Terach says, what are you talking about? Idols have no power. They can't do anything. That can't happen. So Abraham asked them, okay, if that's true, so why do you worship them? Oh, smart aleck kid, I'm going to take you to Nimrod. He gets thrown in the fiery furnace for such a thing. So the Ramchal in Derech Hashem says he's the pillar. He is the absolute pillar. Everyone else came out of him is an offshoot. Very much an offshoot. Right? They became great in and of themselves, which is a tremendous thing. But at the same time, it started with him. So everything, goes on in the world today. We're attached to them. Everything goes through them. We're walking on their coattails. If we had to walk on our own coattails today, there wouldn't be anything left. We'd all be gone. There would be no Jewish people. Go back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. Back to that original chaos. That's what would happen. So here the Medrash says, the whole point is the merit of our forefathers. Right? That's what it says. And through them, what do we see? We, the Jewish people, have to go through them. Those are our credentials. So you're going to say, if I didn't have those credentials, you wouldn't have a Jewish people. No one would be listening now. We wouldn't be here. Because the Torah was created for the sake of the Jewish people to accept the Torah. Right? If you go through the book of Genesis, very beginning, you get to the 6th day. Right? The Torah says Yom HaShishi. The 6th day. When it goes through creation, it mentions the 1st day, a 2nd day, a 3rd day, 4th day, 5th day. See, I can count. Right? The 6th day. Why does it say the? Why does it say HaShishi? Because it's a reference to what's the 6th day? 6th day of Sivan. What's the 6th day of Sivan? Matan Torah. Right? When God gave the Torah to the Jewish people, i.e., we commemorate on Shavuos. So Rashi and others say, if the Jewish people would have come along and accept the Torah, then there would be no this world. Someone had to accept and be the flagship for God in this world. And if no one wanted to take it, not even the Jewish people, God would say, I don't need this world. What comes along the Jewish people, they accept the Torah, fine. So the hint in that verse, Yom HaShishi, is the fact that the Jews are going to accept the Torah. The Jews are going to accept the Torah Mount Sinai. And if not, no world. God didn't need this world. God was busy building, destroying other worlds. Right? But God wanted to have his stamp in this world. He wanted someone, to bring his word out. Who did he do it through? The Jewish people. He chose us, we chose him. Right? But the seed needed to be planted at the beginning. And we needed a very strong tree. An extremely strong tree. Who was that? That was Abraham. And everyone agrees. He's the father of all nations. Now the Muslims may agree. We made Islam, Yishmael look bad. Very well may be. Right? All kinds of other things. Fine. But everyone agrees who he was. Everyone agrees what his power was. For us, he brought something to the world where, I've heard many people say to me, everything you've gone through. So you are Avram Avinu. I'm like, what are you kidding? But how do we fight our trials and tribulations? How do we have that ability? Ma'aseh Avosim and Labanim. The actions of our forefathers are given over to the children. Had he not gone through what he went through, we'd never be able to fight whatever we need to go through. He brought that to the world, and that exists for all generations. Now, does that mean it's going to be easy? No. Does it mean, we're going to roll out the red carpet for us? No. But look what he went through. We all think, and I'm not saying it's not true, we all think we got difficulties. Whether it's parnasa, whether it's health, whether it's, family, million things. Maybe all of them together in one shot. So we think, come on. We have it hard. And for us, it's hard. No question. Every generation has it hard in different ways. But if you go back in history and you look at what our forefathers went, you look at what King David, you think you had it bad? Read the book of Psalms. See what he went through. His father-in-law wants to kill him. His own son wants to kill him. He's running for his life day in and day out. His son, King Solomon, didn't have that. Had it a lot easier. But you never hear David complain. You never hear him say, woe to me this, woe to me that. He says, God, you're going to help me even if I don't deserve it. You're going to take care of my needs. You don't have to complain. Think about what he went through. Can you imagine what he went through? Run away from his father-in-law to hide in a cave. I mean, can't imagine. I'm not saying what we go through is nothing. We have our own trials and tribulations. Everyone has them. I'm saying in the bigger picture, we see what they went through. You can say, wow, they were much bigger than us. Their souls were much bigger. They were able to, go through and suffer and this and that. We're living in a cream puff generation. True. Right? That's true. We mentioned many times. 100%. 100%. But that doesn't matter. We also have our trials and tribulations. But, if we reading the book of Psalms, I think puts things in perspective. I think it puts things in perspective in a number of ways. And to see what he became through it. See how great he became, how his emunah bitachon went through the charts. His belief and faith in God through the roof. Because everything he went through. Not one complaint. You don't see one complaint. Other less great people say, listen, I'm serving you, I'm working hard. Why are you putting me through this? Why do I have to suffer? Not saying they're perfect by any stretch. Right? You look at the end of Tractate Brachot, the story of Rabbi Akiva. And as he's being carved to bits by the Romans, his students ask him, they say, Rabbi, this is the Torah, this is the merit for learning Torah. He gives a whole sermon. I was bothered by this verse. One day I was waiting to give up my soul, now I have the chance. They say that's what it means. Said that's what it means. Not everyone agreed with him, but that's how he learned the verse. And as his flesh is being ripped to shreds, he's telling over this. He's giving over this whole sermon, this whole drasha to his students. Can you imagine that? He had a rough life. Started learning, imagine a 40-year-old coming with his 5-year-old to school to learn the Aleph base. Humble beginnings. His father-in-law, the richest of that generation, refused to help support them. What, you're going to marry? His daughter Rachel's going to marry, someone doesn't know anything? I'm not going to support you. They were tremendously poor, unbelievably poor. Not to mention, he had 24,000 students die within a period of 33 days. That's more than 700 students a day. And he didn't give up. And he taught 5 other students, and that's where we have Torah Shabbat Peh. That's where we have the oral law through these last 5 students. He didn't have an easy life by any stretch. Right? And then this is how he goes out. And he's being shredded, flesh being ripped off. And he said, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And he died. And the Torah says, Rabbi Akiva, Muchen L'chayo Amabo. Says Rabbi Akiva is welcome in the next world. Hard to fathom. We look at people in history and we see what some of the greats had to go through. Some never had kids. Tremendous trial. There were heads of yeshivas, thousands of students, no students of their own. Sorry, no children of their own. Also very hard. What does a woman usually, I should say usually in quotation marks, what does a woman usually want? At least one child that she give birth to. A woman can't have children. It's hard. I mean, some people today don't want children, okay, but I know someone got married late, can't have kids, never have kids naturally. They got burned by the system. Go out, see the world, this, that. Time they finally wanted to settle down, time they met someone, this is what happened. Got burned by the system. Probably still very bitter. But all they want is a natural child. It's not going to happen. I mean, if I was a betting man, I'd put all the money I don't have down, but it's probably not going to happen. They're already in their early 40s, mid 40s. Almost, I wouldn't say impossible, but almost. So That's a huge trial. Livelihood's also a huge trial. Health is also a huge trial. A lot of things. A lot of things, we don't necessarily expect. And our lives don't turn out the way we think. And a person may say, well, I didn't sign up for this. Right? We mentioned this before. But don't the trials make us who we are? They could break us also, but they make us who we are. That's what they do. Right? So in the end, we'll come back to this premise. My Savo Simon Labani. What happened to Abraham, he put into the world. He gave us that ability to fight against the world. Had he not done that, we wouldn't be able to do it. It'd be much too hard. So when a person fight against family, friends, this, that, and they're trying to do the right thing, I'm not saying it's not hard. Right? Our situations are not different. It's just, it's a different generation, different things. But when we look at previous generations, and what people went through, in the struggle, each generation has their own thing. But the reality is, you got someone who's able to fight against the time, fight against the other side. And he fought against the other side, the entire world. You're going to think, come on, we're not the entire world. Even though the Mishnah Sanhedrin says each person's their own world, it's true. Rabbi told the story, very interesting story. He used to walk with the Brisker Rav Israel Zev Soloveitchik of blessed memory, and he was late. One day he came late. So the Brisker Rav asked him what happened. Why were you late? So he said, I got delayed. I got delayed by a funeral. And by a funeral of another Jew. I said, I got delayed. So the Brisker Rav rebuked him. And he said, what? It's just a stam. It's just a general, funeral of a Jew. You know what a Jew is. You know what the makeup of a Jew is. The fact that each person's their own world. And what that represents. He said, oh, you just think you just went to a general funeral? Oh, the Brisker Rav hammered her. Oh, it's just, it was a funeral. Whatever. I got stuck in a funeral. The Brisker Rav said what? A Jewish soul's doesn't mean anything to you. It's its own world. Each one. See, that's what makes life so interesting. Because, we're too busy trying to survive in this world. We don't think about bigger pictures. We don't think about what we have the power to do. What do we just react. Most times, someone says something or does something, what's the first thing we do? Boom, we pounce. It's called a knee-jerk reaction. Anyone doesn't know. It's a knee-jerk reaction. Torah doesn't want us to have a knee-jerk reaction. Torah wants us to be cool, calm, etc. at all times. Not an easy thing to do. Definitely not an easy thing to do. But the reality is Torah expects a lot over you. And when we look at the bigger picture and we see what our actions do, the Rambam in the laws of repentance says every town, every city, every state, every country is on an equilibrium. There's a scale, and the scale is always going like this, up and down. And my action right now can make the scale go down on one side or the other. Because our actions matter. So if our actions matter, why aren't I living my life like this? Why don't I live my life like this is, my action's going to turn the scale this way or that way? Because either we think, come on, I'm an infinitesimally small speck of cosmic dust. What I do doesn't matter. God's got his galaxies, his black holes, all this, all that. I'm small. What my actions really do anyway? Oh, God says, really? You don't think your actions matter? The Nefesh Chaim brings this down, which we mentioned before. Nefesh Chaim, famous student of Rav Elijah Vilna Gaon, right? Rav Chaim of Volozhin. And he brings down, you think your actions don't matter? Brings down the very beginning. of this book. You think your actions don't matter? He says, look what happened to Adam and Eve. First commandment, don't eat from the tree of knowledge. What'd that do? Brought death to the world. Was there supposed to be death to the world according to God? No. He had to go to plan B. He knew that was going to happen, but okay. Gave man free choice to act one way or another. One action. And we're still trying to get back to where the world was before Adam and Eve sinned. But there's only one time in history that ever happened. The only time in history that the world went back to that was when? Given in the Torah. Given in the Torah, Mount Sinai. And then we should have gone straight into the land of Israel, and that would have been it. But what happened? Comes on Mr. S. Comes on the Satan, the evil inclination, the angel of death, says, He goes, I ain't letting this happen. And he puts out an image of Moshe Rabbeinu being dead. And then the sin of the golden calf and the world went down. And we're still holding there. We're still holding that point. Even with the temple in Jerusalem that we had, before it was destroyed, we still weren't there. Still didn't get there. So we only have a certain amount of time left before the Messiah can come. A couple 100 years. It's going to come by hook or by crook. Either we deserve it or we don't deserve it. It's going to come one way or the other. Right? But we're paying that price. We're paying that price, and every time somebody dies. It says according to Kabbalah, who's the first person you see is Adam Marisha. First man. And he nods and he says, because of you, this is what I have to go through. That's part of his atonement. One event. One mistake. Now you're going to say, I'm not, we're not at that level. The stakes are not that high. They're high for your soul. They're high for our potential. The stakes are so great, it's the difference between where I'm going to end up in the next world. That's how great it is. Now you're going to say, if I flub up once, it's going to happen? No. Depends what you do. Depends what level you're on. What the source of your soul is. There are a lot of different factors. A lot of different factors that go on. But one thing we have to realize, that beyond the shadow of a doubt, what I do matters. Meaning, if God forbid a person speaks badly against someone else, guess what? That spiritual imprint exists in the world until you ask them for forgiveness. Yom Kippur doesn't help. Fasting doesn't help. Suffering doesn't help. Death will not help. Death helps to atone for certain things. Right? And we're not going to get there today, but we'll speak about it probably next week. And that is, why not over here? Why doesn't death help over here? Because this is a transgression between man and man. A transgression between man and man, what does it do? How does it go away? Right? How in the world does it go away? It only goes away when you ask that person for forgiveness. Now, if you apologize to the person, you don't say what you did, obviously they may hate you more. But you ask them for forgiveness. And if they refuse to forgive you, you ask them again. And if they refuse to forgive you, then you bring a whole entourage. Then you bring a whole bunch of people with you. And that should bring, hopefully, rachamim, compassion. And that person should forgive you. Now, if that person doesn't, after 3 times, you don't have to worry about it. Your obligation is finished. They get the transgression. So the Rambam and others say, if someone transgressed against us, even something egregious, and they come and ask us for forgiveness, deep down, we should realize God's using them like a stick. They're liable. There's no question, let's say. But we should forgive them. Because if we forgive them, measure for measure, God is going to forgive us. God is going to forgive us. Now, that's a hard thing. Right? Why is that a hard thing? Because you're going to say the person caused me pain. The person caused me damage. The person did a lot of different things over here. True. And even if that is true, God looks at what we do, and then he'll say, someone did X, Y, and Z to you. Caused you damage, caused you pain. So what do? You work on yourself, and deep within your heart, you're able to forgive them. Now, being able to forgive them means, doesn't mean I have to be best friends with them. It means it's a clean slate. 100% a clean slate. Now, obviously not an easy thing to do, depending on what the person did. But imagine in heaven what this means. If a person themselves looks away from what someone did to them, God is going to look the other way what you did against it, measure for measure. Now, a person's going to say, they're going to say, come on, look what this person did. Look how bad it was. True? Right? Let's say it's a horrific thing. Let's say it's a horrific thing. 100%. But if a person realizes it's not about you, you didn't do anything to bring this on. Someone did it to you. So there are two things going on over here. One is definitely a test. God's testing the person and using that other person as a stick. In other words, famous parable, a person hits a dog with a stick. Who's the dog go after? The stick. Dog doesn't go after the person wielding the power. So you're going to say, so why did God do this? I don't know. I'm not a prophet, not a son of a prophet. Right? We don't know. It could be something our soul in the previous life deserved to happen. It could be as a test. It could be for any number of things. We don't know. We can't know in this world. Impossible to know. And even if a person would know why, let's say they caused it themselves. I'm pretty convinced something terrible happened to a person, and they realized what they did wrong. Let's say they had a revelation. A prophet came to them and told them exactly why it happened. I don't know how someone's going to take such a thing. If they're going to say, wow, I can't believe I did that, and that's what caused it, and all that. Some people will say it'd be a tremendous release. Maybe. Depending on what it is. Right? But if someone gets hit right between the eyes, they get hit right between the eyes, and they're told, you did this, you did that, you did the other thing, so I brought this punishment measure for measure. I don't think you'll sleep too much after that. Now, that's me. I could be wrong. Someone could have a tremendous relief and say, at least I know why. I don't know if it's going to make them feel so great. But even so, we don't know. There's nothing worse than being in doubt. Nothing worse. So in my own personal life, what I've gone through, so, there are certain things that can be justified. What happened and why. And that person was just a stick, you're right. But in the end, what the right Torah philosophical outlook is? Whatever happened, I ended up where I am now. 13 years living in the same place, and two of my kids got married to two people on the same street, one building apart. Now, I wasn't privy to that information 17 years ago. Or more. But now you see the end result. Now, other things haven't worked itself out in other ways, okay. But this is a major thing. It's a huge thing. Divine providence, no question. Spoken about this a lot. There's no question. But at the same time, you see how it all worked. Been around the world, South America, New Jersey, back here. All these different things. Sometimes it was easy, sometimes it was hard. Many times it was just like on my knees, not knowing what to do. And what was the end result? This is one of the end results. Now, I can say I didn't sign up for this, but I'm getting benefit, tremendous benefit. And if God would have said, listen, I could have taken your life for this, that, and the other reason, said I took your money. Now, that would be a little bit of consolation, maybe half a consolation. You say, okay, you could be dead. You're right. That'd be bad. That'd definitely be bad. But God gave you another chance. He gave you another chance. He turned you inside and out, turned you around the world, but look what happened. Now, is everything, is this a totally happy ending? Not necessarily. It's a definite benefit. I don't think there's any question. But we don't know why these things happen. 1.5 million different reasons why. Right? I speak about this a lot because I get the same question a lot. Right? And that is, I want to know why. I want to know why these things happen. I want more than an inkling. I want to be told why. We're not privy to that information. And I would say, at the end of the day, it might break people. It doesn't really matter why. You're going to say, but I didn't do anything to cause it. That might be true. You're going to say, but if it's my reincarnated soul, it's not fair. He must have done really something bad. Maybe. Very well could have been. And it's payback, and you have to go through it. That might be the reason. But I'm pretty sure if a person was told point blank, you did this, and this, and that's why you're paying for it, I don't think a person's going to take it sitting down. I think it's going to break people. I would think. Some people, they might think it's great. I got an answer. Don't know. Right? But, in this case, when it comes to atonement, between man and man, what has to happen is the person has to ask for forgiveness. And that person has to grant forgiveness. And if they don't grant forgiveness, then they get to sin. But if someone comes to you, the Rambam says, and others say the same thing, you should forgive straight away. You don't want to be considered cruel. But look what they did, you're right. And it was bad, and it was horrific, and a million other things. 100%. 100%. But let's look at the bigger picture. If you look at the bigger picture, it's a different issue. Totally a different issue. Because now I understand better. And now, at least if I don't understand, but it makes more sense a different way. What are you going to say? I'm still suffering. I'm still this, still that. Okay. First, I got to figure out how to get over it, how to go through it. It's not an easy thing. I'm not going to say in my own personal life, every day I was up whistling Dixie. Never. I had good days, I had bad days. Right? Hopefully I had more good days than bad days, but it was a trauma. There's no question. Absolutely no question. It's not going to be passion speak about it because I lived through it. I survived somehow. Something egregious over here. And no empathy. Very little empathy. Imagine you feel like you're alone in the world. I wasn't. I had good help behind me. I had good rabbis behind me. That built me up and whatever. But still, when you're scrambling around trying to put the pieces together, it's hard. So looking into the past and understanding what our forefathers went through, what King David went through. I'm not saying, I'm comparing myself to them or we should compare ourselves to them. We got it a heck of a lot easier than they had it in many ways. I'm not saying anyone's gone through trauma or suffered, making any comparisons, right? We're not saying that. I'm just saying, life today is a million times easier than they had it. Multiply by infinity, a lot easier. But each one has their own, has their own trial. Each generation, has their own thing. Well, what they have to go through. So the whole point over here, and I guess I'll take questions. The whole point is it's through the merit of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That's how we get on to it. It's through their merits. Because Avram put it into the world, fought against the world. That's what he did. So as we said, Ma'aseh Siman Labani. He gave us that power to go through it, to fight against the world. We may say, how am I worthy to do this? How can a person do this? People do it. Some people get broken by it also. Right? But That's not the point of what a trial is. I use myself as an example. There are certain character traits God wanted to pluck out of my system. And according to nature, it never would have come. Never, ever would have happened. So what did God do? He said, okay, I'm going to orchestrate it in this way. And I'm going to do all these different things. And I'm going to bring out this thing, and it never would have come. Never. According to nature, never happened. Now, I would have expected that. But at the same time, changed the way I think. Definitely changed the way I view things. And had I not gone through it, never would have happened. Never. So is that beneficial? I suffered like a dog. No question. That's what God wanted. But what did it do? It gave me the strength, not only to get through it, not only, come out of it, in different ways. But, someone can say, oh, you wouldn't understand. Now, if I didn't go through it, what could I do? I can empathize. I can say what the source to say whatever, but it's not the same if you hadn't gone through it yourself. True. Very, very true. Right? I remember somebody told me many years ago. I didn't really tell them the whole story. I mentioned, passing. Person, I also lost a certain amount of money. Also swindled or, whatever. Well, anywhere close what I lost. But okay. But it wasn't like we had this whole conversation. We bonded. I told me what he went through and the suffering. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like that. And other people say, how are you standing? How do you still smile? How do you come in and sit and learn every day? No one knows the difference. Go, I don't know. That's all I know. That's the thing that kept me the sanest. It's learning, getting strength from what I learned. Now again, did that come easy? No. That days I didn't want to get out of bed 100%. 100%. Right? But at the same time, we got to remember the good. And there is good. There's a lot of good. We forget the good. We only say what I'm going through is bad. And it's hard. And it's this and it's that. And it's true. We look at it as being, being like that. Got a million things to be thankful for. Problem is, someone told me, they've got, the only thing they associate with Judaism is pain. And when they're in pain, that's when they do the best. When things are going well, they struggle. So I said, but once you're in pain, I said, why don't you think about all the good? He goes, I can't do that. Like that didn't even get off the ground. I said, why don't you just write a list of things you're thankful? Nope, it's not gonna help. Why? Because when a person's in pain, that's all they think about. And even if you had a piece of paper, you wrote 10 things you're thankful for, you're not even gonna look at it. Because you're still too much in pain. You gotta let it go. Because if you don't let it go, the good you don't see. And you got to be able to see the good. Because there is a lot of good. Right? But, the problem is that, when a person suffers and they go through a hard time, it's hard to see anything. It's hard to see anything. Now, person can know, let's say, a person is depressed. They know what triggers. They can know what triggers certain things. And even if they know, they stay away from it. Let's say something gets triggered. It can take them, maybe a couple hours, maybe a day, maybe take 2 days for them to come out of it. No matter what they do, it just takes a certain amount of time, to come out of it. But a lot of it is wasted time here. Yeah, again, I'm talking to myself more than anyone else. It's wasted time. Focus on this, focus on that, forget it. It happened, you move on, you got to try and move on. But there's so much more to be thankful for. So much more. Right? But again, what's the answer on the other side going to be? Someone's going to say when you're in pain and when you suffer, you can't see the good. It's true. Right? It's very hard to see the good, but that's what we have to do. I would say like this, and when it comes to health, anyone who, God forbid, has ever been constipated, a couple of days, a person in agony, all they want to do is just get it out of their system. All they're thinking about is the pain. They're not thinking about the good. They're thinking about they're in pain. They want to get rid of the pain. do this, try that. Oh, finally, something comes out. Again, we're not going to get gross here. Something comes out, and then like it's a whole flood. Oh, they're ecstatic. They're ecstatic, but they can't think about the end thing until they've gone through it, until they finished it. Because they're still in pain, it's hard to think of the good. I agree. I'm not going to disagree here. The person's going to find mechanisms to get themselves out of that darkness. Because when you're in that darkness, it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help anyone around you, it doesn't help yourself. And it's very easy to get in that darkness. Very, very easy. Very, very easy. Any event, I'm going to take any questions. Anyone have any questions? Someone asks, do we consider Avram the first convert? He wasn't a Jew. That's the whole question. Was Abraham and Isaac, Jacob, were they Noahites or were they Jews? Right? If he kept the entire Torah before the Torah was given, right, he just didn't go through a proper quote-unquote conversion. Right? Some say that when the Jews went on Mount Sinai, they're all converts. So would I say he was the first converts? No. He was the first one who believed in God, right? In the true God. In the oneness of God and God's absoluteness and all that. That's true. But that doesn't mean he was convert. Right? That's what there's some commentaries that go through and try and ascertain, who Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their kids were. Were they Noahites? Were they converts? They keep the Torah? They weren't. Or they kept it stringently, but not in other ways. Not that they were obligated. Right? It's a whole question. It's a whole question. It's either we say, if the Talmud says he kept the entire Torah before it was given, doesn't necessarily mean he was a Jew. Doesn't mean he was a convert. Right? Could have been a Noahide. There's a problem with saying that they were Noahides. Because there are things that, that they did that would show that they weren't. That they're actually keeping some aspects of Torah mitzvahs. So it's hard to say that. Right? Very hard to say that. When I say the first convert, hard to say. That's what I would say. Any other question? Someone asked, if God gave us suffering, draw close. The suffering went away. Life became good, maybe too good. Person declined in his fervor. Trials come back, sure. When a person forgets what they went through in the struggle, in different things, God can bring it back. God can bring back different trials. Right? We got to, we got to get the message. We have to get the message. And if we don't get the message, and come back much stronger. Much stronger. So 100%, person, if they get tossed around, they have difficult trials, get the message the first time. Repent, make sure it doesn't happen again. Don't become complacent. Because if you didn't get the message, the trial could be a lot worse. It could be a lot worse second time around. I remember someone telling me, it's like, wouldn't you rather be on the other side than, than the poor side? It's, of course, no one wants to struggle. Nobody wants to go through that. So you hope that, you hope you got the message. That means you're going to become rich necessarily. Right? My case. So, but you hope you got the message so you don't have to go through it again. We don't have to struggle as much or whatever. You want to get that message. Because if God took someone out of a situation and then they go back and do the similar things, then you didn't learn what you went through. Then for sure you didn't learn. And if you didn't learn, God says, why did I do this to you? And then he comes back and zings you 10 times stronger next time. You want to get the message the first time. And once you got the message the first time, you want to act on it, you want to change, etc. You don't want to, and then God takes you out of it. God takes you out of it, and then you mess around and you're lazy and this and that. God says, why did I take you out of it? Why did I waste my time over it? That totally can happen. We don't want that. Totally don't want that. Is it against Judaism to fear future trials? Well, we pray every day not to bring us to trials. You can't live in fear. Rashi says it's one thing, in the Talmud he says one thing you're allowed to fear. You're allowed to fear if you're going to forget Torah. If you're going to forget what the Torah says. Otherwise, you can't live in fear. Fear of punishment, lowest level of fear. I.e., I'm afraid if I don't keep Torah mitzvah, I'm going to fry in hell forever. That's the lowest level. But he says fear is something where I fear I'm going to forget Torah. Future trials, can't worry about. Can't worry about the future. You got to worry about right now. You got to worry about what I'm doing now. Future, it's God's job. You let him deal with all that. And that's not for us. We have to deal with things right now. And God doesn't want you to be afraid. He wants you to be afraid. He wants you to be afraid of sinning. He wants you to be afraid of doing the wrong thing. He wants you to know there's reward and punishment. That should scare a person. But future trials, he doesn't want you to be afraid of that. Yeah, any other questions? Or any general questions? All right, there are no other questions. I'm going to sign out. Anyone has any questions? I do this every Sunday, 4 o'clock Israel time, 9 o'clock Eastern time. In about an hour, we're going to do Tanakh talk, controversial issues. And then after that, it's going to be No-Hide Nations, No-Hide Laws at 2:30 Eastern time, 9:30 Israel time. So anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Michael Chaim Kaufman, or Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism, send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com. Wish everyone a good beginning of the day, middle of the day.